So I just did Avi's former focus class, and from someone who has a running background and someone that gets stubborn in training, it's definitely was something I took out of my comfort zone, and I found myself getting a little bit embarrassed around the movement because I'd never done it before, but I'm sweating, like, oh my God, it was hard, but also it was challenging. I think sometimes you need to take yourself out of your comfort zone, so thank you, Avi, for that class, and I feel it in my body, and I feel the sculpt already, so definitely learn a lot from that.
Welcome to Move, Sweat, Discover, the podcast where fitness meets self-discovery. My name is Avi, and today we have motivational speaker, addictions counselor, and life coach, Lauren White. Welcome, Lauren.
Hey, thank you, Avi, for having me. Honestly, I'm super excited, and the fact that I've known you for years and you're doing amazing things with this podcast. The fact that I, feel grateful to be on there and share my experience. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm super honored to have you on and to speak with you today. So you have dedicated your time to transforming lives. You're drawing on your own kind of personal journey with addiction and self-sabotage. You overcame profound challenges to achieve sobriety at just 18 years old. So fueled by your experiences, you made it your mission to help others. And the impactful work includes collaborating with organizations like the Amy Winehouse Foundation to share your journey and your story of recovery. So we know each other through the Hong Kong fitness scene. So Hit 45, Lights Out, when the boutique scene was at the top of its game in Hong Kong. I remember coming to one of your classes, actually, Lights Out, and you were full of energy. And I remember kind of being really attracted to just who you are as a person. Like you radiate so much positive kind of vibes. And I remember we kind of got to know each other a little bit then. But I didn't know anything about your background. I didn't know anything about your past, your addictions. All I knew really was, like I said, this rising star kind of in the Hong Kong fitness scene. And then you moved away to the UK. And then consequently, that's when I found out about, your story. So I want to dial it back to the beginning. For people that may not know you, may not know your story, can I ask you to share about how you got into the drink and the drugs at such a young age?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that, the reason why I don't I do talk about my story a lot, but when I'm face to face with people, it's not really the first thing that I share.
Sure.
And for me, it's when you said about radiating a room and being positive and energetic, the reason why I'm like that is because for my teenage years, I wasn't a happy person, and I was a very sad person, and I was always, worried about X, Y, and Z. And when I decided to change my life around and get sober, and I found this new way of life, this energy and this acceptiveness and this self-love and self-acceptance in who I am. I started to become just a very positive person. And I always say to people that it's not about what we go through in our life, it's about how we deal with it. And it's our mindset. And, for me, I'll go into a bit about my childhood. I grew up in an area in Hertfordshire outside of London. I have two brothers and a sister, and two parents, and I got everything I wanted growing up. I had an incredibly supportive family, an amazing family, but I also had, some stuff in my family that I don't really share about in podcasts because obviously it's a bit too much. But I had some stuff that made me feel like I wasn't safe. And then by the ages of 12, 13 years old, when you're transitioning to being a younger adult to then being an older adult, there's so much challenges that I went through from turning into secondary school. I got diagnosed with ADHD when I was 12. I got told I was dyslexic as well. So I put a lot of pressure on myself to try and, fit in. And naturally, where I grew up, it was very competitive and it was very
Mm.
judgmental, and it was very much about what you look like, what car you drive, all of these things, like what universities does your kid go to. And that was the culture that I lived in. And I mean, it was amazing in so many ways, but also it was very hard. And, you know, for me, when I was 12, 13 years old and I had all these feelings, right? And I talk a lot about feelings. Um, I didn't feel good enough. I had a lot of fear. I had a lot of self limiting beliefs. And then by like 12, 13 years old, when someone gives you alcohol, you're gonna drink it.
Yeah.
And for me, I don't really describe myself as an alcoholic because, my addictions led me to multiple things, right? It was
Mm.
a progressive illness, and it was the alcohol that started. And then I started to do party drugs like MDMA and ecstasy. And then by the age of 18, I was a full-blown bulimic. And I was doing everything to change where I felt. And within those substances that I was using, on top of the binging and the purging with the food, I had a lot of depression and a lot of anxiety. And the progressive illness from 12 years old to 18 years old was just awful.
Mm.
And by the time I was 18 years old, I couldn't live my life anymore. And I'm very lucky and blessed to have family members that one had issues with substances, but also had recovery, right? And I knew that I had a very addictive personality, and I knew that I was someone that was prone to keep going and keep going and keep going, and I justified it, right? Because by the age of 18, I was at university. If you looked at me, you'd be like, this girl's really pretty, because I was like
Mm.
modeling and presenting, and I was working in clubs. And on the outside, I portrayed this perfect life because that's what we do. But on the inside, I was the most unhappy person. Um, and that's what I mean by justifying it. And I justified it in so many ways because, when someone looks at an alcoholic or a drug addict or a bulimic as something, they just see the physical. And I didn't have the physical because I wasn't that bad. But by the time I was 18 years old, I could have got worse. And
Mm.
I saw my whole life flash before me. And I was very lucky enough to basically get to the point of like, okay, I can't do this anymore. And then I went into rehab and I changed my life around. And going into rehab at 18, 19 years old and changing your life around, like it was bulimia that kind of was the stepping stone. My younger brother had cancer and that really affected me. There was a few traumatic experiences in my childhood that really affected me. And
Yeah.
that led me to just being really self-sabotaging and putting like so much self-harm on myself and pressure on myself. That when I went into rehab, I started to realize that like I have a choice. I have a choice today. And a lot of the choices that I made in my teenage years were because I was so scared to actually feel my feelings. I was
Mm.
so scared to actually deal with the underlying issue, which is me. Um, and then the eye-opening thing about going into rehab is actually facing your reality and facing your feelings. And, I don't know if you've done therapy, but I talk about therapy all the time. And, someone that's so honest about their struggles, everyone has struggles.
Yeah.
I'm not the only one that has struggles. I'm just very honest about it. And what I found myself doing when I got sober and going into, what I was going into was that I slowly started to realize that no one talks about their stuff. To be
Mm.
able to walk into a room and say, yeah, I'm a bulimic, or be able to walk into a room and say, hi, I struggle with depression, or hi, I do this, or hi, I do that. It's terrifying because you're getting vulnerable and you're getting, you know, honest about your struggles. But when you start to own it up to it, it's the most incredible thing. And that's when I got introduced to 19 years old, introduced to Amy Winehouse. Well, I technically like Amy Winehouse's dad is
Mm.
like a family friend because um, I'm Jewish and he's Jewish, and like we like our families run in the same circles, and I naturally just got involved with them.
Yeah.
And I naturally started going into schools with them to do talks around my story and my journey, and to be able to go into schools and do talks and help people understand that you may have an issue before you have an issue, and it's about using tools to be able to deal and cope with those issues rather than turning to drink, drugs, bulimia, all of those things. It became my passion, and slowly I started to realize that when I talk and I share it, I light up in a room.
Yeah.
Um, but at the end of the day, like my whole outlook on life is normalizing the word addiction. Like addiction is not just a drug addict or an alcoholic. It is anything to change where you feel that you cannot stop. So I try to help people understand that you could be addicted to your phone, you could be addicted to work, you could be addicted to people. And it's about having the awareness, and it's about doing something about it, because it doesn't get any worse. And that's what I spoke about, the progressive illness. Like,
Yeah.
yes, by the time I'm 12 years old and then I get to, 18, everything that I said I wasn't going to do, I did.
Mm.
Imagine if I was 30. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
So that's kind of a bit about my story.
How did you then, like at such a young age, kind of recognize that you had like a problem, an issue? Because like drugs and alcohol were super prevalent in the school and the circles that I went to in Hong Kong. And just to share a little experience that I went through, I used to go drinking with my friends when we were like, 14, 15. And one night I had too much to drink and I had to go to the hospital because I was throwing up blood. And no one around me, like none of our kind of friends or family were saying, like, oh, I think Abby's got a problem.
Mm.
Like what in you did you make you come to that realization that like, oh shit, I need help? Like, was it like your parents or your friends, did they say anything to you, or like how did that kind of shift come about?
I think it was when I was doing everything together.
Hmm.
And I was waking up the next day and I was angry. I couldn't live a day without binging and purging on food. I couldn't wait to binge drink on the weekends. I was in a toxic relationship with a guy, and I'd rather be with the guy because I didn't want to be alone. Um, I was isolating. I was having goes at my family. I didn't want to look in the mirror. Like all of those things led me to being like, I need help.
Hmm.
I also had a really bad issue with undereating and overexercising as well, starving myself. You know, uh, like I genuinely hated myself. You know,
Hmm.
so it wasn't really much about my parents. It was more about like me and how I felt within myself. Like at the end of the day, like I felt like I had to do something about it, and it was when two of my family members were sober and I saw that they were happy. And because I saw they were happy and I was unhappy, that was when I needed to get help.
Hmm. I think it takes a lot and it shows a lot of strength of character to be able to kind of recognize that in yourself.
Yeah. I think that my biggest, I think you either, this is just my opinion, that you either have the willingness to want to change or you don't. You either have the
Absolutely.
strength to want to change or don't. And even though I was a little bit of a troubled child when it came to myself, and I naturally am a self-sabotager, right? And I'm going to just say it there and then. I even now sometimes self-sabotage, not in a bad way, but as in like I've got it in me to want to just, enjoy the pleasure of like eating loads of food or smoking a cigarette or over exercising. Like it's just what makes me feel good in some sense, because it's a dopamine, and I talk a lot about dopamine. And thing is for me is that even though I have that side, I also have the wanting to change side. And it wasn't necessarily my parents sitting me down and being like, "Hey, Lauren, like, have a problem," because the reason why, and I can't really share it, but it was very difficult for me to say that I had a problem with food and was drinking and was doing drugs that I said I'd never do, and in toxic relationship, because I was so scared to say that I was suffering when my younger brother had cancer.
Mm.
And a lot of the attention at that moment in time was on him, which is so fine. But for me to admit that I was struggling was very hard. So I just didn't. I just didn't talk about it. Do you know what I mean? I'm a very good person when I was younger to just, and I know a lot of people relate to this, is like isolating. I love to
Yeah.
isolate. Um, and I love to just avoid saying that I was struggling. So for me, I was more of a silent seeker. Like I had family members that drank way worse than me, and I had people around me that were drinking way worse than me. But the things that I did was a lot behind closed doors, and I would go into my room and I would just basically just binge and purge and self-sabotage, and that was just the way that I dealt with it. So I deep down wanted to get help for a very long time, and I think there was one day where I saw my family members that were sober around me, and I was like, I can't live like this anymore. And the thing is there's like living and existing, and for a very long time I was just existing.
Mm. So can we talk a little bit more about that self-sabotaging behavior? Because, I've kind of
Yeah.
read a little bit about like how this is a big focus for you in your coaching, and like things like procrastination, like, and I totally resonate with that because I can sit on my phone for hours, like what do they call it? Doom scrolling or whatever.
Doom scrolling,
Yeah.
yeah.
And,
Yeah.
like I think to many others out there as well, like it's not so obvious. It's not so obvious the things that you're doing. Like I've even heard you kind of saying that things like vaping is self-sabotaging. Yeah.
Yeah. And vaping's huge, and the mad thing is that a friend of mine in July, no, sorry, no, not July. A friend of mine like 2 months ago ended up in hospital for vaping too
Oh,
much.
wow.
He passed away. He and I worked together for the Amy Winehouse Foundation, and he actually ended up in hospital for vaping too much. And it's all a way of trying to basically avoid reality. But then obviously you've got like the dopamine that you get, the dopamine hit that you get within vaping. It makes you feel good for that period of time. And the same thing with doom scrolling, you get one inkling of not feeling reality. And I share about this a lot, and especially like, not just not just big cities, but
Mm.
like generally like if you're constantly on the go and you're constantly busy and you're putting so much pressure on yourself and you're working so much and everything's like intense, the minute you get that like doom scrolling thing and just sit and relax, it makes you feel good. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it becomes like your guilty pleasure. Like my guilty pleasure was the Daily Mail for ages. I was just watching the Daily Mail. And I know you're gonna say something to me, you'll be like, it's not bad for you. I know it's not bad for me, but it can be an addiction. And I share about this a lot. Addiction doesn't have to be a bad thing. You can
Mm.
channel your addictions in a good thing, in a good way. Like I've challenged my I've channeled my addictions into fitness, working. Like obviously, if it's too much, not good for you, but you can channel it in a healthy addiction, which is a healthy habit, pretty much. It's when it's a problem, and most of the time, it's a problem when it's a problem. And that's something that I feel a lot of people need to talk about, but also need to be aware of. And need to ask yourself where there's two types of habits and addictions, and then there's another type of habit and addiction. And the good habit and addiction is like if you're waking up every day and you're going to the gym, that's a healthy habit.
Yeah.
That's a healthy kind of an addiction. Um, but if you're going to the gym every day and then you're stopping not going to see your friends, and you're not seeing your boyfriend, and you're losing weight, and you're obsessive over it, and it's affecting you physically and mentally, then that's a problem.
Mm.
And that's something that I like to talk about, because at the end of the day, like self-sabotage is all stemmed towards two things: self-esteem and self-worth. If you have low self-esteem and low self-worth, deep down, you're going to self-sabotage. If you've got high self-esteem and high self-worth, then you're less likely going to turn something to change the way you feel. I'm 12 years sober. I've done so much work on myself. Trust me, I've got some low self-sabotage, self-esteem stuff, but when it comes to me and who I am as a person and where I want to go in my life, I know who I am, I know what I want, and I know that I'm never going to drink again. And that grows my self-esteem and self-worth. And that's why it's so important that now, 12 years later, I don't feel the need to self-sabotage, because I have so much confidence in myself and who I am, that it doesn't lead me to wanting to take myself out of reality.
Yeah.
But it's a lifelong it's a lifelong journey, and I wouldn't want to sit here and say my life is perfect and I'm perfect and I don't do X, Y, and Z. Like, sometimes over exercising, sometimes overeating, sometimes overworking, and it's a lifelong journey. It's probably always going to happen, but the awareness and having the awareness is so key, and having the ability to take a step back and go, I need to do something about this. I need to see someone about this, and I need to be honest about it is really important.
Yeah, you mentioned that it's a lifelong journey. Even as I understand it, recovery is an ongoing process, so like it never ends. What challenges do you kind of face ongoing?
I love that question, even though it's like proper scary to answer that. Obviously, by 18, 19 years old, I made a conscious decision to never drink again, and do drugs, and turn to mind-altering substances to change the way I feel.
Yeah.
And it's actually been relatively easy for me to not turn to those substances. You start to realize that it's not drinking drug that's the problem, it's you.
Yeah.
And I realized that it was how I was dealing with the issues that I had in my life. I think, and I share about this a lot, I think food is the hardest struggle that I've had since being in recovery. I don't know if you hear this a lot, but like food is something that you have to eat every day.
Yeah.
So if you have an eating disorder or you have bulimia, it's something that you're facing your addiction every day, pretty much. Whereas drinking drugs, like I don't drink every day. I
Yeah.
just give it up completely. And that's been my biggest struggle. And, the bulimia was something that I had to go and seek therapy for. But the binging, there's times where I was binging and I was binging to cope. Uh, I'm going to be completely honest, and I'm 31 years old. And what's really helped me with my binging and what's really helped me with my self-sabotage is taking myself out of the environments that started my binging and purging and my drinking and my using. And then the other ones are basically things like, making the decision to leave a job that you don't want to be in, slowing down, getting in your 5 a day, not being tired, not being angry, not being lonely. And, I made a really conscious decision to leave, a really intense job, last year or a year and a half ago. I decided to make the decision to slow down. I started to make the decision of who I surround myself around with. I started to look at my triggers. And I now live in Bali. And honestly, like, I'm not free from all my self-sabotaging behaviors,
Yeah.
but I'm like, and it's nothing to do with Bali though. That's the thing. It's to do with the fact that I've made a decision of what makes me feel good. And I realized for myself that when I simplify things and I do things like easy, rather than it being like 50 million things burning out, like, everyone knows me and I do 50, I'm like all over the place. I'm very ADHD. And the more I start to simplify it and just literally just focus on the day at hand, actually, the better I am within my self-sabotaging behaviors. And I hear a lot of clients of mine, and people say that the reason why they're self-sabotaging is they're burning out, they're not looking after their bodies, they are saying yes all the time to everything under the sun. They like going out clubbing till 5 a.m. and then they haven't slept and blah, blah, like all these things, surrounding themselves around the wrong people. They're in toxic relationships. They're basically not showing up for themselves and accepting themselves. And I think when I turned 30, it was the first time in my life that I actually showed up and accepted myself for who I am and started to really do that inner work. And now I don't really struggle that much, to be honest.
Yeah. Let's talk about triggers. You mentioned those a little while ago. For me, what I've kind of been leaning into, I've actually just been leaning into my triggers. I recognize them. I recognize when I get annoyed, when I get upset. And I've actually just been addressing them head on and been like, like with my boyfriend recently, he wasn't able to make a date that we had, and I was triggered. I have like issues with rejection and abandonment, and I was like, I went into myself, and that was my go-to reaction, just to go into myself, be like a little bit arsy, maybe be a little bit sassy, but then I recognized that I was just being triggered, and it was nothing to do with the situation. It was just my trigger. And so I had to lean into it and be like, you didn't do anything. Nothing happened, but like I was triggered by like my rejection, and abandonment issues just kind of flared up. And I had to just like put my hands up and be like, this is part of what's happening at the moment. Let's talk about how we can manage them.
Yeah, I mean, most of the time our triggers come from trauma responses
Yeah.
and past experiences. So, if you've been through a past experience in your life where a guy hasn't got back to you or you've been ghosted, and there's one thing that a guy does, because I've been in a situation that like has an inkling, you get triggered off, right? And then you're going to go back into that traumatic space where you don't feel safe. And that's pretty much why we feel triggered. I do think that when it comes to triggers, it's really important to understand what they are.
Yeah.
And it's important to understand about, I talk about relapse prevention, but that's quite a deep word. But for me, it's about putting tools in place to be able to deal with those triggers. So, for example, like when I was younger, like buffets were like, I'd end up binging on loads of food, and that was a huge trigger for me. Without saying that I'm not going to go to a best friend's birthday because I'm triggered, it's about me then having someone that I can call before, having someone that I can call after, and then stepping out a hand and just being mainly consciously aware of how I am in that time. Like I get triggered off when I'm around too many people. And there's times where I feel less triggered and there's times where I feel more triggered. But the more you're in your conscious awareness and you're surrounded in like how you actually feel, the more you can realize that you could take a step back at any time. But then in your situation, if you ever feel triggered, I think it's important to express how you feel. In a body language and tone way where it's like, this is how I feel and this is why I feel it. And and most of the time, if you have that honest conversation about it, it actually makes you feel better.
Yeah, no,
But I don't know, like, sorry, I was just saying that, like, I mean, like, I have so many triggers. My family home was a huge trigger to me because of my childhood. And I used to literally in my room just isolate. And it still is a trigger to me. And every time I come back, it is a trigger.
Yeah.
And I'm still trying to work on that. My family know about it. And for me, it's like I can either do the thing where I never go home again, or I put those actions in place and those tools in place to actually face those triggers. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it's association. It's what you associate. Like I associate my room as going into my room, binging and purging and self-sabotaging.
Yeah.
That's what I associate my room as. I associate going to a bar and going to a club as drinking.
Yeah.
So the minute you walk in a room, you're going to associate subconsciously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you walk into a bar, do you walk into a bar now these days?
Always. I have no issue walking to a bar.
Yeah.
But I also feel like I love the person that I am now.
Yeah.
But compared to the person that I was. Like when I used to drink, right? I wasn't the person that was like, hey guys, like look at me. I used to literally go home. Like I was like so fucked that I just be like, I used to get taxis all the way home. Like sometimes at university, I didn't even make the club. Like, I used to go missing. Like I used to lose my phone. Like I was not the fun drunk. You know what I mean? Drugs were different. We won't go into that. I mean, I love drugs. But at the end of the day, like none of it made me feel good in the long run. And now I love, and I've actually learned to rediscover myself in my 30s with going out, having fun, partying, and being sober. And I do it. But I'm very wary of when I want to leave. I'm very wary of who I want to be around, whether I like the music. And I also
Mm,
make a decision whether I want to go. I don't go anywhere if I don't want to go. Do
yeah.
you know what I mean?
Yeah. Um, let's talk about your relationship with fitness and movement. So obviously, when we met, you were the fitness queen. um,
I still am the fitness queen.
you are the fitness queen. So was like movement and kind of exercise a part of your life always, or like when did you kind of discover that?
Yeah, I honestly think I've been very blessed growing up. My dad got me into the gym when I was like 13 years old.
Mm,
My dad had a personal trainer. His name's Carl, and by 13 in year seven, I was very naughty, and my dad could see that like I was very naughty. I was like the popular kid in school that like was screaming and shouting, and I wasn't doing my work. And my dad literally sat me down one day, and he was like, "I'm gonna get you a personal trainer." So by the age of 13, 14 years old, I had Carl,
amazing.
and and I like fell in love with fitness. But going back to that, when I was in primary school, I was a very good runner.
Mm,
And I used to run, uh, I used to do competitions. I used to do county. I was very good at squash. Um, like cardio was always my thing, you know.
yeah.
But by the time I was 18, 19 years old, I, one of the things that really helped me in my recovery was half marathons, and running.
Yeah.
Like, I generally feel like yeah, it's the best thing I ever did. Like, I generally highly recommend that the only way to build self-esteem and self-worth and to grow, into this purpose is fitness is a lifestyle. And I'm not here trying to say that you need to go run a half marathon or do a high rocks or do a 10K, but it's something that you need to do, like
Mm,
movement. And what I shared with you when you spoke about movement was like in the last year I've got into being to dancing.
yeah.
I'm not like professionally dancing, but like I was going to salsa nights, I was, going out, and there's something so incredible about flow, and it's
Mm.
more about being free. And for me, it's because I felt free. And I felt like I can let my body go. And that's why like I love it and I highly recommend it for everyone.
I don't know if you remember this, but one of the first times we met was at a morning disco, like a sober morning disco.
Yes. Wait, you were
I was
there.
there. It was like, I
Oh,
don't even know where
first
it was, like
night
in some weird, like dingy hole. And then it was just like in the morning. Yeah,
of
I
girls.
remember it very, yes, exactly. Yeah, I remember that very
Yeah,
well. Um,
that's hilarious. 'Cause I don't remember you were there, but what I do remember, and that's my mind's gone blank now, but what I do remember was that first light was the first time that I actually felt free.
mm,
And I remember we went there and the lights were off and it was a Thursday morning before
yeah,
work.
yeah,
Oh my God. And I was like, this is incredible. Like it's so true though. Like you don't need to have drink and drugs to party
yeah,
or go out and dance. Like, you know, it is a way of life and I think it's really, really important to express that
yeah.
because as human beings, I think society's made us feel really rigid.
Where was movement then in all of this whilst you were kind of going through your issues as a teenager?
Yeah. Bloody hell. I never share this on podcasts, which is really good actually, because it's like something that I've missed out in my childhood.
Hmm.
Um, so from 12 to like 16, I was like running. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was very good at it. And I was running for my secondary school and sports was like my thing. I was like my thing. And then at 16 years old, I fractured my spine.
Okay. Wow.
I had two hairline fractures in my spine. I've got like a screw in my back. Um, and I just fell out of love with fitness for like a couple of
Hmm.
years. And I think I lost, and I think that was when my partying and going out and starving myself and
Hmm.
self-sabotaging came because I didn't have that element of like, like when you're injured, how do you feel? You feel
Mm.
cramp. Like
Yeah.
honestly, like you're moody, you don't want to be around anyone. I know, I
Yeah.
like literally like so limited.
And
And
it's almost like a loss
so
of
my
identity as well, because you were like
100%.
super into, yeah.
Like that, but that's the thing. Like, I did feel like in my teenage years I kind of lost that.
Yeah.
Um, but it's also really interesting because something that I've really recently started to realize was that when I first got sober, I became quite rigid in myself because I was so scared that I was going to go self-sabotage again. So
Mm.
I became quite OCD. Like when I was living in Hong Kong, I was going to bed at 9 and getting up at 5 every day.
Mm.
Like I had a very regimented life. And I do think it's good for some people, but I kind of lost a sense of freedom and play.
Yeah.
And um, I think structure and routine is so important. I do have it. And in Bali, I get up at 7, I go to the gym, and I have a very amazing life in that sense. But I think it's really important. And I know this may not be what you mean with movement, but for me, being spontaneous and being free and play is
Mm.
really important.
No, sure.
Um, and in the last year, like I think this is also another reason why I feel so happy is because I feel spontaneous and free.
Mm.
And I'm able to like, just go with how I feel rather than constantly feeling like I'm like put in a box or, I'm constantly feeling like I have to like sit in somewhere or do something. And, I do think it's really important. Like I play paddle twice a week here.
Mm.
I go dancing. I, get on my bike and I go to the beach. Like flow and movement and freedom is very important. Otherwise, as human beings, we feel like we are so stuck.
Yes. Was there,
And this is what I feel. Sorry, you go.
go ahead, go ahead.
No, I just said this is what I feel kind of I felt like in London.
Mm. Was there a pivotal moment? I'm curious, because as I mentioned earlier, when I knew you in Hong Kong, you were the fitness trainer. Um, was there a pivotal moment? What was the pivotal moment for you switching from fitness to coaching and motivational speaking?
So I'd always done motivational speaking. Like it was
Mm.
always my passion. In Hong Kong, it wasn't really like I did some things in Hong Kong. Like
Yeah.
I did the mental health conference. I was going. I don't know if you knew this, but I was going into schools in Hong Kong. I was going into private schools
Mm.
with the Kelly group and doing talks. Um, but the only issue that I had was that like I got off this job by Shayna and it became like my main role in the job and I just hyper focused and I kind of forgot about like my
Right.
motivational speaking side.
Yeah.
Um, do you want to know the lie or the truth of why I moved out of fitness?
Both.
Okay, well the lie is that obviously like I fell out of love with it.
Mm.
And then the truth was that I had a lot of issues with the the wellness industry and the fitness industry.
Okay.
Um, and I left Hong Kong, and Hong Kong wasn't the reason. It was London that I just found very much about what you look like,
Yeah.
very much about how many followers you had. I was in a gym that basically, like, I had trainers that were putting me down. I had a
Uh,
manager that was putting me down, and I was like, I can't do this anymore.
mm.
And it was very much about competition, you know, rather than like it being about being me training people.
Yeah.
Um, so I kind of took a step back, but then I also slowly realized that every industry I've gone into has always been about my looks.
Mm.
Um, and like I modeled at a young age, I was a hostess in a club. I, was doing presenting for a bit. I, worked in like sales. It's always been about the personal training. It's always been what I look like. And I think that there was this like especially with someone with an eating disorder, I think
Yeah.
there was this subconscious pressure all the time. Um, and that's why when I naturally fell into speaking and talking and working with people and doing workshops, it was more about just sharing my experience rather than what I look like. Because naturally with the fitness stuff, whether we want to say it or not, you are judged on how you look.
Mm. Absolutely.
And don't get me wrong, I like to look good, But sometimes I think it was at the detriment to my own health because I would walk into a gym and then someone would be like, did you do that class? Do that class? And then I was doing 4 classes a day.
Mm.
You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
I'm like, is this healthy? Like, this isn't healthy. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and now I love to train for me. I realized I love to train for me and it's for me. And like, I get to choose when I want to train, not it became a little bit by the end, a bit of a chore.
Yeah, no, I hear you. Sometimes I think that like you can't like the purpose and the why does get lost a little bit in all of the kind of fancy, how many classes have you done? Have you done? Let's do double classes, and oh, yeah, have you seen the killer abs and all that kind of stuff? Absolutely. Sometimes there have been moments for me as well where I've fallen out of love with the industry, and I'm like I feel jaded, and I feel like I've lost my way a little bit. But I
Yeah.
always have to come back to my purpose, and that is, obviously I can be teaching, this is that whole Lady Gaga thing. I could be teaching like 99 people and then it'll just have affected one person kind of thing. And that always brings me back to, the purpose. What have you learned about yourself over the years through movement?
I have learned that, wow, I've never been asked that question before. Um, I have learned that I definitely have learned that I'm more free flowing than like a rigid person. I think growing up it was a very incorporated into me that I need to be working like a workaholic.
Mm,
I need to be making loads of money. I need to have the nice car. I need to do X, Y, Z. And through movement, it's like actually like none of that really matters. But I also naturally, I naturally love to move. I'm not lazy.
mm,
I'm like the most unlaziest person. Like everyone knows it, and people make comments and they're like, "Oh, Lauren again," and I'm like, "No, but it's what makes me happy."
yeah.
Like I'm never injured. It's what makes me happy. Like when I go on holiday, like I go for a run. Like, you know, even I remember it was Shayna's brother's wedding. It was in Philippines. The first day I went for a run. Like that feeds my soul.
Mm,
And it's not for everyone. I don't think everyone like feels amazing when they train or go to the gym. But for me, like movement makes me feel good, and it actually gets me out of depression and anxiety. And it's something that I need because I'm naturally an anxious person, an overthinker, and I'm very ADHD. So when I move and I move my body, I start to really get to the point of like, oh, actually, like this is what I need in my life for my medicine.
yeah, I love to hear it. I love to hear that passion. It kind of almost gives me goosebumps to hear someone else talk about the power of movement because I'm the same. Like I am at my
Yeah.
absolute happiest when I'm moving. It doesn't matter what it is, like if it's a hike, whether it's a run, whether it's rollerblading or whatever.
Yeah.
I just love it. And I appreciate all modalities of movement. And I appreciate that our bodies can move in so many
Mm,
brilliant ways.
mm.
On that, you did my family forum heated sculpt class the other day, um, well, virtually, albeit from your house in Bali. You messaged me after and mentioned comfort zones. Can you speak a little bit about
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. Oh, I am the one thing that I am really starting to do right now. Is do things that don't make me feel good.
Mm,
And like people yet again think I'm nuts because doing a half marathon, doing a triathlon, doing a high rocks, like I'm okay with that. That's like what makes me like I'm fine with that. But you know, things like yoga and Pilates and more feminine, like dancing movements
mm,
and the family form stuff was hot. It was hard. It was
mm,
like, I was like, oh my God, like, and do you know what it is for me? It's about being seen. And
mm,
I felt seen. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing because it's about, yet again, taking yourself out your comfort zone. But throughout the workout, I knew that it was hard and I felt it the next day, but I just felt embarrassed because I couldn't do it. Like
mm.
I was doing some movements, but then some moves I was like, for goodness sakes, Laura, like it's frustrating. And I do think when we're talking about comfort zones and we're talking about growth, like you need to do things that don't make you feel good. No,
Yeah,
sorry. You need to do things that you're scared to do and things that you aren't that good at.
yeah.
And obviously, I think that the family form stuff, the Pilates, the yoga, like it's not natural to me to do it. I
Mm.
get embarrassed to do it
Yeah.
when I'm doing it. But I felt amazing the day after. But I felt seen. I felt like, oh my God, like embarrassed because I just am not naturally that type of person.
Yeah. Let's stay on comfort zones and limiting beliefs for a little while. Like, how has putting yourself out of your comfort zone worked for you throughout the years? I mean, like when we talk about your recovery, like the mindset shift, like I want to dive deeper into your why.
I think that, you know, and I shared this the other day to someone, and it's not my quote, but it's
Mm,
someone else's quote. It's like, it's so easy to be in our comfort zone because our comfort zones, is what we know. It's not, it's right in front of us. Like if I have a job that I'm going to every single day and that job basically is what I know, but I hate that job, I'm going to stay in that job most likely because the feeling of not being in that job and being, completely like unemployed terrifies me. And, you know, moving to Hong Kong at the age of 21, like didn't have a bloody clue about Hong Kong at all. I literally like how I met Shayna was through another friend that I
mm,
did something for, and she was like, "Do you want to move to Hong Kong?" That was like the most scariest thing I ever did. But I took myself out of my comfort zone and I moved there, and it was the best thing I ever did. And that's how you grow as an individual, because when you look at hindsight, you actually realize that actually, like, I did that. And that was how I was able to move to Bali because
mm,
I've already done it, you know. Um, I quit my full-time job of 3.5 years, like a year and a half ago, because I knew I deserved more. And I think that I kind of got to the point where I felt like I needed to just move on. And a lot of people were scared of that change. A lot of people are scared to jump out and see what's out there because they're scared that they're not gonna, find something. But actually, most of the time you do,
mm.
and what I've learned is that you can do anything if you just put your mind to it. I left London, I turned around to my parents and I'm like, I'm moving to Bali, and they were like, you're nuts. A year and a half later, like I've made more money than I did in the last year before, and I'm thriving. And it's not like I was trying to prove myself to them. It's just I know deep down that like stepping out your comfort zone is the way forward. And the worst thing you can do is go, didn't work, move home,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Circling back to the family forum session, so part of why I started this podcast was, in a group fitness setting, there is something to be said about there's a moment like in a group fitness class where you look at the person next to you on the next mat and you kind of share a little moment, which has happened countless times um, in any kind of group class setting for me. And you can learn so much about other people just by sweating and moving next to them. What then did you learn about me during that session?
About you,
Yeah.
that you're a boss bitch. I was like, this guy, like the way you were like flipping, I didn't think anything of you. I just thought you were like owning it.
I love that.
I was like, this guy, I was like, he's confident. Like, I was like, I kind of was like, have you been a burlesque dancer before? Literally, that was what I was thinking. I was like, this is sexy. And then I was like, I kind of want to do what he's doing, but I just don't know how I can do
Oh
that.
my God, I'm sweating. Thank you so much. I love that.
Yeah, I'm also sweating. I'm living in Bali, but yeah. No, it's true. I was like, this is incredible. Honestly, I was just like in awe of you. Yeah.
I from that side, I mean, like obviously it's quite difficult in like virtually, and also the screen is
Mm.
behind me. But I recognized and I could see that you weren't you. There were some moments you were out of the screen, and there's some moments you were in the screen. But I think the one thing that I took away from that session with you, is your resilience and like of course, like having known you for a little while, there were moments where I was like, is she gonna come back on the, like, because obviously I'm teaching, I'm being a boss bitch, flowing and sweating and kind of
Yeah.
lead the people in the room, but I really appreciated your determination and ability to kind of just like stick it through. And I think that
Oh, I wanted to leave. I wanted to leave. I was like getting really frustrated that I couldn't do it.
yeah.
Um, but I'm also, and that's something that was, it's really interesting because when you said that, like I got goosebumps and I was going to cry because the one thing that I got told in rehab when I was like 21
Mm,
was that like literally we went in a circle and every single person had to say one thing about the other person, and every single person said to me like, you are resilient, you
yeah.
know. And I'm resilient, but I also I show up.
Yeah.
And I I went through a period, and I was actually thinking about this yesterday. Like I went through a period when you know, my like one of my family members was really ill, and I went through a period where I was a flaker and I just
Mm,
wouldn't say yes to things because I wasn't happy in myself. And I think from that experience, I've become someone that's very, very prone to saying yes to
yeah.
things, and not letting people down. And I think a lot of me with that whole thing was like, I don't want to let Avi down.
Mm,
By just turning it off. And yeah, I stuck through it, even though it was difficult and it was hard. But I also knew that that is about, you know, taking yourself out of your comfort zone and doing something that you've never done before. And it wasn't that it was an amazing workout, because it was, because also I felt like my legs the next day. Like
mm.
it was hard. It was a really hard class. You know, I'd never done anything like that before. Um, but naturally, obviously, I kind of, you know, um, yeah, I kind of wanted to just run away.
I think
And
this
that's
is
that.
why. Sorry,
Yeah,
I
sorry.
think this is why I gravitate towards you, because I do really see your resilience, and I have been told as well that that I'm someone that is pretty resilient, and I think that I, I use this analogy a fair bit, but when the door closes for me, I find a window, and I see that in you absolutely, and I just wanted to give you my absolute respect because yeah, it's not an easy thing.
Yeah, no, it's not. And you know, in the last month, I probably had the hardest month of my life,
Mm,
if I'm honest. And like really dark stuff has happened in the last month for me, and like the way that I've navigated it and dealt with it has been on a different level.
mm,
And it's just another, you know, another a thing that I've had to conquer in my life with a lot of things. But you know, due to the work that I've done on myself and the people I surround myself around with, and you know, the decisions that I've made, the choices I've made, I generally feel like it's, you know, you can get through things.
mm.
And you know, I've come from someone that literally every day would be like, is this my life? You know,
Yeah.
like through self-sabotage, I literally convinced myself that this was my life. And I thought it was just, that was it. And now, like, I live a normal life. Like, I live a drama-free life. I wake up and I literally am so happy. And I generally feel like anyone that's struggling, like, you can get out of that. You can. Um, it's hard, and there's going to be times where you're going to take 10 steps back, and
Mm,
you know, there's going to be times where you're going to struggle again. But I think that when you spoke about resilience, it's about just keep pushing through. And you know, I think what has really helped me is understanding that just because I have a bad day doesn't mean I have a bad life.
yeah.
And through those bad days that I have, they lessen and they lessen and lesser, and they come less, less, less. And now, like, when I have a bad day, I just take a step back and I oversee the fact that I know that it's just a moment, and I don't define it within my life. And then I put one foot in front of each other and I go, okay, tomorrow's a new day.
Yeah. I think something that's come up a lot recently is that the only way is through. It's going to be tough. It
Mm,
might suck. It might be so like rock bottom, but the only way is through,
mhm.
and then you're away.
Yeah.
Um, we are winding up, Lauren, but I like to wind up with a little lightning round. So 10 go-to questions. Don't think too hard. They're not too serious
Oh my
at
God.
all. Just the first thing that pops into your head. Okay. So the first
Okay.
one, easy. We'll start with your go-to sweat, your go-to workout.
Running.
Love it. Where, do you like running on the treadmill or outdoors?
So it was running outside, but now I'm running on the treadmill. I just go through
Okay.
phases.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I go through phases.
And what are your views on run clubs?
I love them.
Mm.
Yeah, love them.
Okay. Go to self-care ritual.
Massage and ice bath because I live in
Ooh,
Bali. So
love
it's
it.
very
Love
easy
it.
to
Yeah. Go to treat meal.
cookies.
Ooh. Do any particular flavor?
Uh, yeah, Biscoff.
Ooh. As
I'm
in
a
like
white
the actual.
chocolate cookie Biscoff girl.
Oh, wow. Okay. And could you make those yourself or like you can buy them somewhere?
No, they have them here.
Mm. Okay, I'm gonna come down to Bali and we're gonna go get those because
I'll
they
take you
sound
to
pretty
Dan.
damn
Trust
good.
me. Yeah.
Go to travel destination, not Bali.
Obviously. Hong Kong.
Okay, I'll take that.
Yeah, Hong Kong at the moment. I love it there.
Yeah.
Always.
Well, I'll see you in Hong Kong soon.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
will be in August. Yeah.
Go to morning routine.
My morning coffee and then journaling.
Love it. Go to recovery practice.
Stretching.
Do you stretch it every
I
day?
mean, not really, no.
Okay.
Probably why I couldn't do your class.
Yeah. I mean, as I grow older, I'm not saying that
You
I'm
stretch
old, but
more.
as we grow older, yeah, I like really try and put the importance on a stretch before my workout, a stretch after my workout, a stretch before I sleep. Oh, I'm just fucking stretching the whole time. Go to workout music.
Oh my God. Don't laugh, but I love like tropical house, like kind music.
Okay.
Uh, I love like anything like housey type vibe thing.
Okay. Any
Yeah,
particular DJ or artist?
kind music,
Kind music. Okay, I've never
kind music.
never heard. I'll play it on the taxi.
Yeah.
Go to book.
Oh wow. The Art of Not Giving a Fuck
I like that.
and Atomic Habits.
Go to guilty pleasure.
Cookies. Jokes. Guilty pleasure. I don't laugh, but like probably like 3-4 times in a year, 3-4 times in a month, I turn my phone off and just sit in bed and watch movies.
That's the best, actually.
Yeah.
It is
I did that last
actually.
Saturday. I literally didn't leave my house.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for that. That is my
Oh
go-to
my God.
self-care ritual. That is my go-to guilty pleasure. It is my go. It's just my go-to.
Yeah,
Um,
I love it.
Go to mantra or life motto.
Um, I just think like I always share the same thing
It's okay.
though. Yeah, but it's gonna go to the podcast and then it's gonna be like, oh, Lauren said that again. But my thing is your only superpower is that you are you, no one else.
I love that.
Yeah, that's literally like this is yeah.
I mean, it's okay. I have listened to all of the podcasts and all of the interviews you've been on pretty much in preparation for today. And a part of me was like, how do I make this different? How do I, like, what new angle do I get? But actually, what I feel is probably the most important out of any of that is that you are sharing your story. And if this hits
Yeah.
like, 12 new people that have never heard your story and are struggling, then we are winning. So
100%.
thank you so
All I care
much.
about.
Thank you so much for sharing. What is next for you?
Um, so I'm doing a talk for the Sober Summit, which is like a global sober thing, but it's online, which is cool. And then I may be doing a talk for a retreat, but I'm actually just focusing on some secret projects at the moment
Mm.
for myself, which will be revealed in a later date. And then I don't really have a plan. I think I need to find a husband.
What's your type?
Tall, rugged, rugby boy.
There's loads of them in here in Hong Kong.
I know, I know. This is why I loved Hong Kong.
All right. Well, you're coming here in
Thank you.
August, so
I
we'll
will.
we'll set something up. All you
Thank
rugby
you. Find
boys
me a
out
plus
there.
one.
Yeah. How do people find you?
Just find me on I am Lauren White, my Instagram. I have a website that's www.laurenwhitespeaker.com. And if anyone wants to inquire about working with me, or there's a talk that's coming up that you want to come to, just let me know. But most of the time my DMs are always open. If anyone wants to reach out and talk about, self-sabotage and addiction and bulimia and, all of those amazing topics. Work addiction, I love to talk about. I love to talk about depression, anxiety, and just kind of showing up for yourself and really trying to put boundaries in. I'm big on, people putting boundaries in and, you know, not having to do things that they don't want to do. So, yeah,
Lauren, thank you so much. I could
you're welcome.
sit here for hours, like listening to you speak about anything.
Yeah.
You have a beautiful, strong, important voice. And I'm so glad that you're doing what you're doing what you love. And I can't wait to see and hear from whatever you've got up your
Well,
sleeve.
thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I will see you
Thank
in
you.
August with a whole barrage of rugby boys waiting for you.
Can't wait.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Move, Sweat, Discover. If you liked the episode, please subscribe and write us a 5-star review. See you next time.